Hey, podcasters. On today's episode, we're going to talk to a couple of military leaders that you've heard before. We're going to get their opinion on what's going on over in Iran, the airstrikes, the use of AI and drones, how we're using our assets, how we're integrating with the Israeli Army and Air Force, how we're integrating with all our military assets, and what their outlook and what their theme and what their feeling are, what's going on. So I think you'll find today's episode very entertaining and very informational, and I hope you'll take a few minutes to listen. Hey, everybody. Today we have an incredible podcast. We have Generals Larry Martin and General Jake Polumbo, both retired two-star United States Air Force generals, frequent guests on Todd's podcast. They're founder and senior consultants with Two Blue Aces and both great Americans. They are career United States Air Force officers who have served with honor and distinction. Both are heavily decorated and highly regarded among their peers and friends. To listen to each of these generals' solo podcasts with us, General Polumbo is episode number 5 and General Martin is episode number 8. And both are on the second episode of Generally Speaking. All these episodes can be found on todddancer.com or wherever you get your podcast. Thank you, gentlemen, for your service to our country, and thank you for coming in this morning to talk. We are recording this episode at 10 a.m. on Friday, March 7th, 1 week after the first strike on Iran. We are not here to debate the why, but ask these two generals to come and explain some of the tactics, the terminology you may be hearing, maybe some of the planning and the strategy, and give their points of view of what's going on over there. Welcome, Jake. Welcome, Larry.
Yeah, thanks, Todd. And it's good to be back with you and Eli in the beautiful building here at Saunders Real Estate. Thanks.
Yep. Yeah, good morning.
Great. Thank you. How long has the planning for this event been going on? And I don't mean the long-range planning, but at some point someone said, we're going to make this happen. How much lead time, who would be involved in the planning of an operation like this? What level does the Air Force just plan the Air Force portion, the Navy plans theirs, the Space Force plans theirs? How does an operation like this come about?
Well, Todd, the folks that report directly to the president and the secretary are the combatant commanders. So just down the road from where I live in Tampa is U.S. Central Command and Admiral Cooper. So his group has been, when they were tasked by the president and by the secretary to take a look at what was going on. Now, planning for this has probably been going on in one way, shape, or form since about 1979.
Right.
And that's a broader point, is that planning is always going on,
right,
for things like this. But to answer your direct question, when did they get serious?
Yeah, details had to be started working out.
Well, again, they've been working all sorts of contingency plans. That's what the staff does,
right,
is to work all of those different. Jake?
Yeah, I would say the same thing, and we'll get into a little bit more of where and how the planning goes. Like Larry said, Central Command in Tampa is big,
right, and
the Joint Staff in the Pentagon also plays a role, and I think we'll get into that. But I would also bring one other date into that, and that's October 7th, 2023, and I'll just briefly say that was a big event in the turning point in the Middle East when that attack in Israel happened, and that's really when some serious planning started, at least on the Israeli side,
right,
and how the United States reacted to that was big, and it's been a couple years in the making.
And then since the strikes on the nuclear sites that were done last year, there's been planning that's been ongoing and evolving. And the planning is always an evolution based on a mix of the political situation,
right,
and then the requirements that need to go with that. And the military options are simply an extension of that.
Do you think what triggered at this time was the fact that there was 48 or 50 of these high-ranking Iranian officials that were going to be together? Is that what intelligence said, hey, this is what's going to happen? They found that out 3 days ago or, 3 days before and said, all right, we're executing a plan?
Hard to speculate, Todd. There's been a relationship that's gone on between the leadership in Israel and the United States for the last several months. There's been a long-term frustration with the Iranian government that goes on from the United States that dates back through several presidencies. And then how you deal with that comes up to, it's a mix of opportunity and information that comes like that.
Yeah, and it's truly an evolution of how the intelligence builds in the area, but where Khamenei was, where his staff was, where the leadership in Iran was at specific dates over the last year or two kind of factors in to a pattern of life that the Israelis for sure have been watching for months.
And then for the attitude of this administration, it's also shaped by recent events in Venezuela.
Right.
And the success that they had there.
So that emboldened them to think, hey, we can do this successfully in Iraq as well.
I wouldn't say emboldened. I think it gave them a set of experiences that they built on.
Okay. What's the difference between strategic, tactical thinking and planning for a war invasion? And, how do you guys classify this? Is this a war? Is this an invasion? I think politically, war is the word that some don't want to use because some in Congress think you have to get permission. Others in the administration think you don't have to get it for this occurrence.
Yeah, I think when you bring this many nations into a fight, and there are many nations now involved with not only defending themselves, but actually deciding how to react, that really is the definition of a war. The Middle East has been a hot region for a long, long time, for decades, like Larry said. And so I would classify it as a war. I communicated this morning with a retired colonel in the Israeli Air Force who I've been friends with for decades. And he let me know he and his wife have been in and out of air shelters for the last week and that they feel pretty threatened. And he also has a son involved in the Israeli Air Force. He believes it's a war. So what the United States says it is really in a lot of cases has to do now with how to fund it.
Right.
And if it's a war, Congress has to get involved, and I'm sure the president understands that completely.
And to the families involved, whether they're in Israel. I mean, we had a local soldier who was one of the casualties earlier this week. My son knew him and had been in a unit with him before. But I'm sure if you asked that family what they thought, they would characterize this as a war.
Well, I think we've been at war with a lot of nations, and it's happened. I think the technical definition is probably what everyone in Washington's trying to hang their hat on, one side or the other. I don't know.
We can go back to the Korean War back in the 1950s as we've come down that path, Todd.
Right.
But I mean, again, what leaders say to each other over the course of time and history is important, and death to America is a fairly bold statement that's been said many, many times.
Yeah.
So, again, how the leadership of countries interact with each other kind of sets the tone and tenor of the first battle.
At some point, you have to take those threats serious.
Absolutely.
And it sounds like that the government finally had enough. Hey, this was our opportunity.
Yeah. And nuclear weapons changes, the potential for nuclear weapons, Todd, changes everything in a region, especially if they have the missiles to be able to deliver it, from one country to another.
And Todd, one of the things, on Friday when we're speaking, I'd counsel for a lot of folks as they read the news is patience. I mean, we heard that after the strike on the nuclear facilities that we had obliterated them and they were gone forever. Maybe there was more information that came along later that helped refine that better.
Could have been posturing as well.
It might have been, but the point simply being is that we live in an information age where we get immediate results that come in through social media and through the news, and I'd simply counsel a little bit of patience to watch how it develops.
Yeah, that's good counsel for everything.
Yeah.
Not just the events of today, is let events play out. So when the decision is made, or as these decisions are going on, I asked this earlier, does the president say, this is what I want the outcome to be, and then the Secretary of War delivers it, and then the Secretary of War goes to each individual branch of the service, of the Navy, this is our goal, or do they all get in a room and say, this is where we want to be, how can you attain that? How does the discussion go on amongst the branches?
So you asked earlier, what was the difference between strategy and tactics?
Yes.
We would divide it up into three ways. When Jake and I were flying our airplane in a particular way to try to get around a threat, that's a tactic.
Right.
When the president says, I think this is what we want to do in versus this country or that, give me some options, that's a strategy.
Okay.
In between what Admiral Cooper and his staff does is typically called operations, and it's that mix between
Right.
an individual act and the goal. So to answer your question, likely what developed in this is the leadership in Washington said to Admiral Cooper and his staff, and the Joint Staff, give us some options, and they built a set of options for a plan to do a certain thing, and then the powers that be go back and forth and debate that. And update the plans, modify, look at the risk reward for all of that.
Yeah, Todd, on any given day a month ago, 2 months ago, there were 30 to 40,000 Americans on the ground at 19 different locations in the Middle East.
Right.
Stationed there as part of the Air Force or the Navy or the Coast Guard or the Marines. That's where they were stationed, either temporarily or permanently. And there are permanent bases in the Middle East for the United States, and those are Air Force people. Those are Navy sailors. But they work when they're down there, downrange. They work for commanders who are joint commanders. Okay. They are in charge of all of it. One commander can be in charge of a lot of sailors, a lot of soldiers, a lot of airmen, a lot of Marines. And that structure is what you're saying, and what Larry alluded to is, the strategy comes down, but then to be prepared to do something.
Right.
All of those military men and women for the United States are prepared to do something that is a composite plan. It's a joint plan.
And Todd, the services will come in and they'll say, the airmen on that team will come in and say, to get to what you want to do, we'd recommend you do this and this.
Okay.
The sailors might do that. Often,
because they're intimate with their equipment, what their machines can do, what their weapons can do. That's kind of what I was trying to get to, that y'all have explained it better than I did.
But more typically nowadays, because there's no singular threat. There's no threat that's just from the air. There's a threat that also comes from space or from cyber or from the sea. And so the term of art right now for these warriors is they might wear a blue Air Force uniform, but they're engaged in a cross as a joint to use all the tools that they've got to make it work better. And frankly, that's the secret sauce that helps the United States.
Cooperation. Yeah.
It's working together like that.
And realize it comes together, it evolves. Realize 5,000 sailors on the Gerald Ford come ripping into the Middle East via the Mediterranean about a week or two before this started. That's 5,000 Americans that come in there, and they become ready to go and do the battle plans, while another 5,000 are afloat in the Gulf of Oman on the Lincoln, carrier battle group.
And then there are tankers that come from over here at MacDill that might be as far away as Europe, might be somewhere else in Asia, being brought in for that team. So the synchronization and the coordination of all that, and we don't know exactly, but if there was a B-2 involved, it likely took off from Central Missouri, and then flew there.
Todd's podcast is sponsored in part by Saunders Real Estate, your trusted partner in land and commercial real estate since 1996. With over 125 expert advisors located throughout the Southeast United States, the full-service brokerage specializes in a wide range of property types, from farms and ranches to commercial buildings and development land. If you're looking to build your legacy with a confident investment, please visit SaundersRealEstate.com or call 877-518-5263 to connect with an advisor today. So the logistics you just said about the tankers, is that where the conflict, or the, whatever you want to call it, with Spain and the UK is? You don't get to use our ports, you don't get to use our bases for us to stage the support vehicles, or not vehicles, the support infrastructure, the tankers. Or was the complaint is we don't want your fighters here?
Well, every nation that's involved with this gets a say.
Okay.
And to more or less, some might turn to their partner and say, do whatever you want. Others will say, we really want to know what you're doing. And this interplay just happened, but it's all the time.
Right.
And in the operations that Jake and I planned, I was laughing because people would say, well, don't you get mad at them because their nation has a right to do that. And if we wasted time getting mad at them, we'd lose a lot of energy. So we just update the plan, and then knowing.
Sounds like it's the president's job to be frustrated and angry at you guys and have to carry it out.
But that's also the Secretary of State.
Right.
That's also the negotiators.
It's just the process.
And it always evolves.
Yeah.
As
this has.
Absolutely. And again, in discussions that I had with one of the allied nations that was a little reluctant, they have a national law that says they need to know exactly what's going on. Until they do, they won't approve the operations. And I could also see from the U.S. point of view that they weren't ready to reveal that.
Right.
And so you just have that friction, and that's what you work through.
And there's a huge distinction between offensive operations out of a country and defensive operations and support operations, and that becomes diplomatic language that really, like Larry said, kind of gets worked out by the State Department more than by the War Department or the Defense Department, because sometimes a country will allow operations, let's say KC-135 flight operations out of their country for refueling, but they will not let any airplanes with bombs on them take off.
Or they'll let,
and that takes time to resolve.
Or they'll let medical flights transit the country, or and each country will have their own, and that'll evolve.
Very difficult conversations to have, very difficult problems to work out, but it does seem like they seem to work out. Sometimes it seems like it's just posturing if you know the end result's going to happen, but I think that's the politics of a large part of this.
Yeah.
Not just on the military side, but just on everything.
But Todd,
with stuff's going on in Congress now with other things.
Yeah, look inside the United States. You don't have a unanimous approval of what's going on one way or another.
Right.
So it would seem to me that it might be natural that other nations might be having the same discussion.
It seems like if you're trying to do a surprise attack, it's hard to read too many people into the plan. And so that's just part of the fallout that you're going to get. You deal with it. Seems like it's take 4 or 5 days to deal with it, and we're all kind of moving.
Well, I liken it to a orchestra that's about to happen, but nobody knows when it's going to start.
Okay.
And so the timing of this, it depends on when somebody holds up the, whatever that is, baton and says go. It just depends on when the president and when the Israelis choose to go.
Right.
Unless it's a reaction to an attack that could come from your adversary. So if you think about it, and this is what makes the United States military so good, is they're prepared to go when told, and wherever they are when it starts,
right,
they react accordingly. They handle it, they adjust, they make the adjustments for fueling plans and everything else from anywhere in the region, whether it's in the Med or it's down south near Oman. It doesn't matter for the U.S. military. We know how to react, and we know how to get on track, and we know,
right,
once we're told where to go, we know what time to be there.
And Todd, whether it's a volcano that explodes in Iceland and means you can't go there because there's ash, or because there's a certain day and the air traffic control system in that country's out, so you got to go around.
What?
Oh, absolutely. Or
because it's a holiday or something?
Sure.
Good Lord.
But Todd, that's day to day.
Right.
Not necessarily when you're in conflict. And so the planners and the executors that do this, to them, the fact that the airspace is closed, they sort of care why. They just know that it's closed and they got to go around, and they plan around it. And execute.
You both have mentioned Israel and our relationship with them. They seem to be partners in this conflict right now, this war. How hard is it to integrate their goals and outcomes, which may be a little different than ours? Maybe they're the exact same, I don't know. But you've got this other very effective Air Force, very effective fighting machine that's doing a lot of the heavy lift. Not that we're not doing a heavy lift either, but it seems like a joint.
Yeah, I think that
joint
this
venture
is,
almost.
Todd, a little bit why you're getting a little bit mixed messages from maybe the leadership in Washington. But why did we do this? Well, it might be different. Israel might have done it for a different reason than the United States. Why is it regime change? It is for Israel. That's stated. They stated that, a long time ago. But for the United States, and the protection of national interests, it's different for us. But the good news about Israel is they're a very sophisticated military. They're very capable of handling things, and they're very capable of developing the intelligence needed to have a war like this conducted accurately. So we know how to work with the Israelis, and they definitely know how to work with us. They actually really need to work with the United States to be fully effective.
You know, the word that I've gotten is again, you know, Israel does not have a large tanker fleet for the air. The fact that there are tankers taken off out of Ben Gurion every day, to them, is a huge enabler for what they do. There's no doubt that Israeli intelligence enabled, but the fact, Todd, that the United States and Israel are working and fighting together is relatively rare. We've supported Israel over the years, but the militaries have not worked directly in this way many times before, and there's political reasons for that.
Right.
But we're very familiar with working with the Israelis with good relationships on the military to military side.
You just mentioned the tankers. How long can which fighters were involved? You got the 35s, or the 22s, F-15s.
Yeah, I mean, all of the.
How long can they fly on a tank of fuel?
2 to 3 hours.
Okay.
Maybe 3.5.
In a 16?
2.5.
Oh yeah.
35s, or the 35s leading the F-35s? Are they leading the charge right now? Do you think, or they're
3
all
hours max?
Max.
And how long does it take to fly from
Where they are in the Middle East
Yeah.
to Iran? It takes 2 hours out and 2 hours back and 30 minutes over target. They don't have enough fuel. They can't do the mission without air refueling.
Do they typically get close and fill up just so they got plenty of fuel in case they have to linger over the?
It depends on which country lets the tankers operate in their airspace, but that's what
Part
I
of the
said about the
logistics and-
orchestration is the logistics is where can we refuel in the air?
And then also, what's the threat in the area? The tankers don't have a lot of defensive measures,
Right.
so the tankers can't go right up as close as the attack aircraft can, and so that's part of the scenario and the build.
So far, it seems from an uninformed opinion that our Air Force, our Navy, and our Space Force are the main people in the band right now. I know that all the branches are there. Does that sound accurate, that those are the ones that are mainly involved? If the Army and the Marines maybe or maybe not putting boots on the ground, so they're there as support?
Well, believe it or not, the U.S. Army really runs the Patriot battalion. So all of the defensive measures that our allies have are either enabled by or sometimes run by U.S. Army soldiers, because Patriot is the big, defender in the region for both United States bases where our airplanes are, or for our allies who've asked for Patriots in their country. So the Army has a huge role in the defense of the Middle East, and Marines are always in country. Marines out of that 30 to 40, 50,000 sometimes in the Middle East, there's always a Marine battalion or better in the area for various things that they can do better than anybody else.
And then the other command that's in Tampa is Special Operations Command, and we know we just haven't heard yet, but we know that there are Special Operations forces doing what they do, whether it's observing, whether it's taking action, whether it's blowing things up. We just don't know yet because it hasn't come to light.
Right. What role, the Space Force is the new kid on the block in the service, near and dear to you. What role are they playing in this? Are they, I think I read something, they're all over here in the United States, and they're doing the technical and the satellite stuff. Is that something you can discuss, what their role is in an operation like this?
Well, if we shut down the satellites, Todd, that phone doesn't work anymore on the table. And you can extrapolate from there for what they do. But they're also there to use different assets to provide support, to do observation, to do intelligence, to listen, to provide, and also to secure those assets, to make sure that they don't that they aren't taken out by somebody else, because they're a critical node to enable the joint force to do what it needs to do.
If we didn't have the Space Force, where would those functions be under? Would they be under Air Force?
Well, they were under the Air Force.
Air Force.
So they've been around.
So they've been a spinoff kind
Absolutely,
of the Air Force.
yeah.
Okay.
So
I mean, I didn't think it was brand new task.
No, it's not new.
I figured it was a different branch. So,
but here's for your listeners, and again, the intrigue on this is big for a lot of Americans, but think about how China and Russia look at this conflict. Think about what they can offer. Think about what they might be offering. And then think about how important the Space Force is in that regard, because they also play defensive roles for what U.S. assets have the ability to do, and what our adversaries, read the Chinese and the Russians, can do. That can take some of those out. So, Space Force is integral every single minute of every day of any military operation, and they're always on duty. So it's a big deal. It really is, and Americans are only now, I think, coming to understand, about the potential for war in space. Well, somebody's got to be ready and is ready to do that all the time.
So you both are Air Force guys. Tell me a little bit about timing in an air war. You had mentioned Zulu time.
Yeah.
I would assume that if you bring a B-2 from the middle of the United States, you've got a time when they're there, and then to support. I would think the logistics are just incredible to pull off something like that.
Well, if you're off by a couple minutes, that has a big effect. If you're miscalculating by hours because you're in the wrong time zone, or you're using Pacific time instead of Eastern time instead of Middle East time, none of this works. And so, as I mentioned, Todd, it's a orchestra, but everybody has to be on the same time in order to do that, and that's what we call Zulu time. So for a airplane coming out of Korea that might be part of the attack in the Middle East, he or she has to keep themselves on the correct time for the order that has been given, and that's called Zulu time.
And then even more, Todd, is that's the timing, but there's also the passing of information.
Right.
So you might be an airplane that took off from Central Missouri and has to fly 18 hours. Well, in that 18 hours, the world changes.
Right.
So you've got to get information, and you go back to that discussion of Space Force and of other ways that the communications happen, or you've got to have plans for if heaven forbid the communications went down.
Right.
To do that and to work that synchronization. We did when my previous work, Todd, we talked about. We had a particular soldier that was wounded in the war in Afghanistan and needed to be air evac'd out to fly through and of transit through Germany and then to get onto the hospital in San Antonio. Just to see what it was, we counted the number of people involved in that single mission, and the number went over 1,200 as it went back. And that's from the weather people.
Everyone who touched the mission.
Yeah, that's from the weather people, from the folks who did the gas, from the folks who did the meal, from the folks who prepped the airplane. Now, multiply that by hundreds of missions a day.
Amazing.
And you can see the complexity.
Yeah. I think you talked about that when you flew your U-2 mission. You had some technical issues, and you said people from around the globe were helping you get home.
Yeah.
You spoke to the CFTC about that when you came back to town.
Yeah, the timing of intelligence gathering and when sensors come on and when they're off, when fighters are looking or not looking, when bombers are trying to attack. The timing of this is, if you think about, the Super Bowl and how important it is for a quarterback and a receiver to be on the same timing for a route. You can multiply that by 20x on how important it is, but the timing of intelligence gathering is critical because we might know when the adversary is going to do something, i.e. pull their missile out of a bunker and get ready to shoot it. We might know that, and that timing is critical for somebody who might want to stop that or, continue to watch it. So it's really important. But for a fighter who has 2.5 hours of fuel max to take off and start crossing a massive, amount of water, that tanker has to be there, and that fighter needs to show up on time. Otherwise, you're out in the middle of the ocean without any gas, and you can't get home. You don't have enough gas to get home if you don't have timing for the
And then, Todd,
attack.
often now in the military, we've got the problem is not having enough information. It's that we gather so much information, and that pilot in that F-35 now has to sort that. So when we talk about 5th generation, 6th generation fighters, it's not only about making it hard to see and hard to hear and go fast, but it's how you process that information to make it useful in real time. Because as those air crew are coming into the area, they've got information and they're trying to find the best way. The best analogy I heard to it is it's not necessarily like knocking down a wall.
Right.
It's more like making holes in Swiss cheese.
Right.
And there are holes that open up, and you go through that, and the hole might close later, depending on what the adversary is doing. The word that I use that I like more than anything else to describe it, Todd, is exquisite. It's an amazing collaboration that comes together to make all that happen.
Is that why, and this just came to mind, is that why if we could control Iceland, it's so important because we could have a base there and it is easier to fuel and they're not having to fly the tanker? I think for logistics as much as anything, and I could...
Better example is the Gulf, Todd.
Okay.
When Jake and I were there in the 1990s and 2000s, the United States, had relationships with the different countries that ran from Kuwait out to the Emirates and to Oman. And on any given day, the relationship with those 8 countries, 4 of them were really good, 2 of them not so good, 2 of them really bad. The key was access.
Right.
So we worked with all 8 because next year it might be a different 4. And so to answer your question about any nation, whether it be in the Middle East, in NATO or Greenland, is the issue is access.
I said Iceland, I meant Greenland, I apologize.
Yeah, but regard,
Right.
it's all about that access.
Right.
Yeah,
that comes in.
Todd, it's hard to fathom this. It is for me because of all the flying that I've done. Larry's may have done it, but I've never gone over the Arctic. I've never gone over the globe, from south to north to the other side. He may have, and
I have.
For those of our airmen who have, or even our submariners or our Navy that have worked their way up there under the pole, but we need to be able to go up and over now.
Right.
Because some of our adversaries' capabilities are going to do the same thing in reverse. So that's why it's critical now. Did we go about it the right way in terms of negotiations? I think that's for another podcast. But it's important, like Larry said, to be able to go from a certain location to the direction you need to.
And at a time, Todd, when the sea passage in that area opens up more for part of the year than it used to.
Right.
That's the same reason that we used to sort of think that Alaska was a backwater. Well, Alaska really matters now.
Yeah.
As we're talking about the Arctic.
Hey, podcasters, if you're looking to elevate your organization's leadership, strategy, and teamwork, please look no further than Two Blue Aces. Founded by a team of military senior officers with over 200 years of combined leadership experience, they deliver executive-level consulting, targeted seminars, keynote addresses, and customized business development strategies. Their one-on-one mentorship and strategic assessments are grounded in real-world decision-making under pressures and have helped companies transform succession planning, team performance, and executive vision. It's rare to access this level of insight outside the military, and I've seen firsthand the impact it can make. To learn more or to connect with their team, please visit twoblueaces.com or call 863-223-2554. So a term I've heard recently is the air bridge. Can either of you tell us a little bit about what it is, how to build one?
That's what I used to manage.
Okay.
And the great flexibility that the United States has is to be able to take its forces and take them somewhere else in the world. That's maneuver, is the ability to take a force and put it somewhere else. We're better than anybody else at doing that after long distances. Well, the way you do that, when you got a fighter that can only fly 2 hours, is you got to get it across the Atlantic, and you can hop from base to base, or you can refuel it as you come out. And so it's a cost benefit, Todd. It's not cheap to air refuel, but there's times when you got to do it because you got to get there fast. And not only do we do that with the fighters, but we do that with logistics.
Right.
And we also, if you ask Admiral Cooper, when does he want his stuff in the Mideast? He wants a Star Trek transporter. I want it there right now.
Right.
Okay. But the reality is he's got a lot of stuff that he's got to move. So what do you want to get there first? And that's the planning that goes on. And then maybe some of the stuff you want to go, you could take and ship it by sea, but that's going to take 30 days. Right. So you got to plan ahead. So there's in and of that is the complexities. So the air bridge is usually a set of either air bases or places where we have tankers, and we refuel them, or we refuel them on the ground as they move to wherever we're going to go.
Yeah, and Todd, just briefly, and I know you do carefully listen to the news, but the question is right now, can we sustain what we're doing?
Right.
Do we have bombs and missiles and all that other stuff to keep going? And the answer is heck yeah. But some of it's in the United States.
Right.
Some of it's coming off the assembly line right now.
Or
how does it get there? It gets there via sea lanes of delivery, or an air bridge that's very expensive, but it'll be there in a couple days.
Right.
Or it's somewhere else in the world where it needs to get there.
Long missions, flying them, planning them, how difficult is it, taking a B-2 from the middle of our country over there? That's got to be very complex. Do they have to refuel along the way? Do they carry enough fuel to get over, and then at least are they refueling throughout the?
Probably
If you can't talk about this, that's fine.
No, I mean it's open source, Todd. Between 2 to 4 times.
Okay.
Refueling. The crews practice. The crews go in and they'll. Again, there's great stories you can find to talk about the crews going in the simulator, and they'll practice a long mission like that because they got to figure out what their body's going to do.
Right.
They got to figure out the right stuff to eat, the right sleep cycle.
Yeah, our friend Todd, Dean Kendall from high school, his son-in-law is a new B-2 pilot, and he is very, very new into the mission. And so you can imagine, like Larry said, he's learning how to do it.
Right.
He's learning how to get himself ready for what they call a global power mission. But how does he get himself ready as a co-pilot, not the aircraft commander, but the co-pilot to fly 35 hours nonstop, never get out of the airplane?
Right.
It takes practice, and it really is difficult. And in my mind, your question is kind of variable depending on what you're doing.
Right.
My longest missions in a single-seat airplane were no more than 10 and a half or 11 hours, and I was whooped. I don't know how anybody could do 35 hours in an airplane. But you learn how to do it, and that's what makes our military better than most in the world, because they figure it out. They do the human factors better than anybody, and they work their way into mission capability.
So we keep hearing about how we have air superiority now. How would we have 2 or 3 F-15 shot down by Kuwaiti soldiers? I mean, how could that happen? Do they have our codes? Are they just that much better?
It's happened.
It seems weird.
It's happened hundreds, if not thousands, of times in history of air power. Friendly fire has done this kind of thing. So,
but was Iraq up in the air? I mean, was Iran? Did they have their planes up, or did they think they might have been missiles? I thought we had taken out all their planes.
No, there's still a few left, and
the superiority is different than.
Well, air superiority is usually declared for an area, not a whole region.
Okay.
But you would expect that we would be safe over the skies of Kuwait, and this was a human error. This was a human error by a Kuwaiti pilot that mistook 3 airplanes as enemy airplanes, and he shot them down.
So they were shot down by another plane. They weren't from ground fire.
Correct. And that's where I say, in some ways, that's very human error, because it might not have anything to do with codes,
Right.
and information that you get digitally or electronically. It might have just been a misidentification in the fog of war, and so this happens, and we should be very thankful that it happened, and we lost 3 airplanes, but the 6 people who ejected out of those 3 airplanes are safe, and they'll fly again soon.
And were recovered. And
And Todd, in that region of the world, there are parts of the airspace where it's very congested. It rivals JFK, it rivals O'Hare for the density that's going through. The Kuwaitis are up on the first day of the war. They're a little jittery that something's going on.
Right.
And a mistake got made.
How do you sequence target? How does the Air Force, Navy, how does the military sequence targets for the best results?
Yeah, it starts with what you started with, and Larry covered on the strategy of a war, or the why of a war. But if we, the military leaders, get given their tasks, it could be that it is a nuclear production facility, and that target is positioned in the country at some point, and to get to it, it takes a plan, Todd, that requires you to figure out, how do I get there and not get shot down in the process?
Right.
So what the United States will do, and we're better than anybody at it, is we'll figure out ways to enable our attack such that we don't put risk to our own people and our own assets at too high of a level right off the bat. And so we'll use things like Tomahawk land attack missiles, TLAMs out of ships or wherever they come from. We'll use stealth airplanes like the B-2, like the F-35, like the F-22, and we'll minimize the risk, and we'll figure out what the sequencing is. So
Right.
Sometimes you don't attack the actual target, the intended target first. You attack the things that are defending it, so that you can then get to it and kill it on the first try.
A couple of terms that the chairman has been using the last week that might be useful to the listeners is General Kane talks about early in the conflict, we were using a lot of standoff munitions. As Jake said, that might be launched off a ship, that might be launched outside, because the defenses are still strong. As the defenses are knocked down, you can get closer, and you'll hear the term stand-in weapon.
Okay.
And so a standoff weapon might power itself, whereas the stand-in weapon might be gravity, where you simply drop it off the plane. And that's the evolution of the sequence. You might want to go get something right now, but to get there, you got to knock the defenses down first.
And that's where I've heard the B-52s and the B-1Bs are now starting to perhaps be activated because they're more of a stand-in and less stealthy. Is that correct?
Well, it's a matter of the munitions that they have.
Okay.
And
the missions that the munition needs to accomplish.
When you hear the term, you heard the other day, you heard 1,000 targets. In the old days, that would mean 1,000 airplanes. Today, that's many fewer, because those airplanes can carry munitions that'll attack multiple targets at a time.
The intelligence, actionable intelligence, and our relationship with Israel, I would think a good chunk of our intelligence and targets and where assets are that we're trying to take out are coming from Israel. I think that, are you comfortable with the quality of information we've been getting? It seems like it's been pretty darn good.
Yeah, we've talked about it in past podcasts, Todd, but again, the intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance stack that the United States can put above a target area or above a country, around and above a country, is pretty impressive, but we can't do it everywhere.
Right.
So when the United States chooses to really, drill down and look and discover everything we can about a country or a regime or somebody who doesn't want us around anymore, that ISR stack, that intelligence stack can be put up, and then we can really, as a nation, almost do all our own work. How does a country like Israel factor into that? A lot of times it has to do with human intelligence.
Right. And that's what I assumed
Yeah.
that it was, is they've got people that look like, sound like, talk like
Yeah. And that
Iranians.
those fill-ins, if you will, sometimes are crucial.
Right.
Sometimes the human intelligence component that can come from another country's capabilities, their CIA, if you will, that becomes, the go point. That's when you decide we're going to go now because we have confirmed something. And that often comes from human,
Right.
not signals intelligence, not image intelligence, not overhead intelligence, but people on the ground.
How did we get so far inside Iranian airspace to bomb where Khomeini was and all of them? I mean, it was a daylight raid that I've heard on the news. Well, they did it during the daylight. They caught them so much by surprise. Typically, if it was stealth, they probably thought they were safe if they were having breakfast instead of a midnight meal.
We don't know yet, Todd,
Okay.
because we don't know all the details. But remember the earlier discussion we
Right.
had. I mean, the chairman gave you a little peek under the tent when he talked about the use of the standoff weapons.
Right. So that's kind of how that was delivered. It wasn't okay.
But again, that's a good guess right now.
But it's confirmed that the Israelis were in and
Right.
over Iran right at the beginning. So
Right.
the Israelis have been planning this for, since October 7th, 2023. They have been watching this carefully to see if they could form, a pattern of life on the regime so that if they chose to, they would go in and take them out. And so the Israelis have confirmed that.
Hey, everybody, this is your host, Todd Dantzler. As most of you know, I'm a partner with Saunders Real Estate and have been a very active and working broker for over 42 years. I have fostered strong relationships throughout the state of Florida, working on properties ranging from agriculture and development land to multifamily, commercial, and industrial projects. If you have any real estate needs at all, please give me a call. I'd love to help. My direct line is 863-877-2846. Thank you. I want to talk a little bit about drones and AI in the battlefield today, controlling the airspace with drones and this thing and equipment like that. How has that all come about? I mean, AI's probably not in its infancy in you guys' world, but it is kind of in the rest of the world.
Well, the first thing to realize is drones are absolutely here in warfare to stay for a long, long time, and countries like Russia and Ukraine are using them daily and nightly in their own war that they've been going on at for years now. So drones are real. They work. They're a low-cost option for either looking at a target or attacking a target. And so those pieces of metal fly through the air all the time.
Right.
So if you're going to use what we sometimes call big sky theory and say they're little drones, we shouldn't probably hit them if we're flying big airplanes, we've determined that's a bad idea, bad way to plan. So drones have to be controlled properly if you're using them for your own attack. But you also have to take into account that the enemy's using them as well, and those pieces of metal have to be accounted for. So an air commander in the region better have a good feel for how to handle his own or her own drones and how to handle the enemy's drones and kind of keep track of them, and if they need to, shoot them down. And I think that's probably where you're going, is those little things are a big factor, and we have to figure out how to handle them.
So I heard something yesterday and again this morning that these $20,000 attack drones that are coming at us, we're spending $3 and $4 million on missiles that have to take them down. Are there less expensive weapons coming out to defend us? I've heard about the Helos, the high energy laser and integrated optical dazzler. which is a very well named. They should just call it Eli, who is our secret weapon around here.
Go Eli.
Yeah. Someone said, it just costs pennies per pulse.
Well, what I saw this morning too was a report that we were going to contract with the Ukrainians to buy some of their technology because they're pretty good at it, as they've done. So the answer to your question, Todd, is right now some of the countermeasures we have are very expensive.
Right.
We're trying to figure out how to make that lower cost, and we're shifting the way that our military goes. Necessity was the mother of invention
right.
for the Ukrainians and the Russians, and we're catching up.
If you hear intelligence that says all of their missiles and that we know where all their missiles and launch sites are, why don't we just go take them out?
We are.
I know, but if you know where they are, you just can't flood the sky with all of our assets and take them out. I mean, again, this is me not knowing what I'm talking about, but you can't just run missions 24 hours a day, fire missiles if you know exactly where they are, or do they have to poke their head out, or you have to have the right equipment to take out that asset?
I mean, it has to be orchestrated every day and night. So again, as we were talking about the timing of things and making sure that you know when they might be opening the doors so that you can get the bomb deeper into the hole where all the drones are kept. There's a timing, there's an orchestration to this attack. Every day, even in day 7, there's a timing area. And
so just because you know where they are, it may not be, there's a more appropriate time, more effective time to perhaps hit it.
The cool thing about it is if you reverse the look, how do you get an airplane like an F-16 or an F-35 full of fuel, full of oil, full of missiles, full of the right bombs that can take out that target? It's got to be orchestrated 24, 36 hours in advance to get that airplane ready to go to take out that target.
And Todd, significantly different if you're talking an Iranian fighter that's got to take off from a 8,000-foot runway. There's only so many of those in Iran.
Right.
A drone can take off from the back of a truck.
Right.
And if you remember during the first Gulf War, we spent a lot of time trying to hunt the Scuds as they moved around. As warfare evolves, in this case, the Iranians are moving those threats around. So I would argue that we don't perfectly know where everything is. We have a real good idea where they are,
right.
But there are still things that we're trying to find.
So if you guys, would you like to be flying today with the equipment that's out there now, or were you happy that you served when you did? I mean, you had great stuff. If you were fighting today, would you say, gosh, we really got the best stuff? We're really as tight as possible.
The mental challenge of handling all these things is something that I think about.
Right.
And Larry, the same way, in trying to.
Well, your bodies couldn't handle what they're going through now.
Handle it. So if
right.
suddenly I could turn back time and my body could handle it, then I wonder whether mentally I could handle it because it's so high tech.
Right.
I think I could. I think that, in talking to the F-35 pilots that I know, I really think that their preparation was kind of what.
Yeah. It's all about the training.
It's all about the training and reps and
that.
sets. And people flying advanced airplanes, they just need training and they need reps and they need sets repeatedly so that when the commander says go, they're ready to go, and it's just another rep and set with live missiles.
So I didn't want to get into too much politics, but I want to ask a little bit about it. Do the soldiers back home, do they pay attention to the media, the politicians, or are they singularly focused on the mission? Just like, God, I just wish they would support us a little bit more. We're 7 days in, so.
Todd, Jake and I served at a time when I was happy to call Julia one day a week on the phone, and I got an occasional newspaper as it came in.
Right.
And and in that newspaper, you were much more interested in what the Bucs score was than anything else. Depending on where the folks are on the access that they've got, they might know what's going on, and they'll pay attention. Their leaders certainly will, because the leaders are getting queried from folks in Washington.
Right.
If there's been an incident, feed me data, telling me what's going on. Did something go bad there? We saw this as we were working. So
and you would get that from regular senators and
no, it comes
representatives, or would it be the chairman of certain types of committees? Did all of them have access to you guys at the level you were at?
Yeah, it was.
I would think that would be a lot of clutter in your head.
When I was downrange, Larry was downrange, where we would have news from the home front,
right,
or visitors from home. What I would offer to you, Todd, was when we had a visitor from Congress, a senator or a congressman, we were really apolitical. I mean, it didn't matter whether it was a Democrat or a Republican coming down to find out more about what's going on. And that's what today I think we need to try and double our efforts for our military who do these things in Venezuela and do these things in the Middle East. We just need to keep the politics away from them, because it doesn't matter if they die in combat. It doesn't matter whether they're from a Democrat family or a Republican family. They were from a military, family who is their sons and daughters, fought in a war and died. It's not political until it absolutely is always political. And it seems today that they are struggling a little bit with the pressures of politics always wherever they are around the world.
So you also hear about the Iranians maybe mining the Straits of Hormuz. Can we not identify that? Do we have the technology? Is that a Space Force that would monitor? Are there sea mines? Or is that just all as a Navy thing?
Oh, the answer to that, Todd, is small boat from the Iranians going out and putting a small things out in the straits.
Right. But there's no way to detect those things with it.
Depends. I don't know.
Yeah, I've flown over the Strait of Hormuz many, many times, and it's such a narrow strip of water. And the Iranians have lots of people that are right on the shore.
I mean, I get it, but
so day and night, can you watch to see whether they're putting mine? It is one of the narrower strategic choke points in the world. And so right now, there's a lot of tankers holed up near Bahrain and Saudi ports, and there's a lot of tankers down in the Gulf of Oman waiting to figure out who's going to declare the water safe, and it might take a few more weeks.
So lightning round, because I know our time's tight here. What sources do y'all listen to for your news and updates?
A mix. There are folks that are very good when it comes. You have to separate news from opinion.
Right, absolutely.
So I would balance Wall Street Journal, New York Times, even Al Jazeera for right now, for folks that have an interest in telling an unbiased story, and then you separate your news from your opinion.
Yeah, and I've said this before with my friend Larry. I will use Larry as a news source. I will use trusted friends of mine who have read something that they go, hey, Jake, read this, tell me your thoughts on it, but pretty accurate from my standpoint.
But not everyone has access to Larry.
Well, you're true. Now, he'll give you his address and his cell phone in just a minute.
Thankfully.
And Julia's here.
Julia's here. She'll give it out.
She'll give it out because he loves to talk. But Larry and other trusted people that read a lot, that's who I use, and I'm on small forums that I stay online with people I trust.
Do you think we're going to be leaving anytime soon? Do you think this is such a narrow scope, or do you feel like, I mean, you keep hearing it's weeks, not months. Who knows whether that's true? I'm sure situations on the ground will dictate.
Too soon to tell.
Too soon to tell, like you said earlier.
But we're not leaving because, again, just like I said 2 months ago, there were 30 to 40,000 Americans stationed in the Middle East, and all those 19 stations. They're not leaving. They'll be there a year from now. I can almost promise you.
And one of the common themes for the anti-war whoever is, hey, we don't want boots on the ground, you got to do this. But I'm thinking if you're a down pilot, you darn sure want some of our boots on the ground coming to get you. Is that commonly thought of? You got to send special forces in to rescue a hostage, to rescue a pilot, to rescue other troops. Is that really considered boots on the ground in the world y'all live in, or is that just some made up
We need
nonsense?
to go. If we have somebody shot down, we have a responsibility to go get them.
It just happened. We just picked up a down pilot in Iran. I don't think it's been reported, and I don't know that I got it in a classified forum, but we just picked up rescued.
Eli's got all this classified information over there.
You can strike that, Eli.
Is there anything that I haven't asked y'all that you think would be germane to what we're talking about? Because this will air in a couple of days.
I think.
Is there anything you want to tell us that we need to be paying attention to?
I'll stick to what I said earlier, Todd.
It's too soon to tell.
Patience.
Okay.
And looking at the sources. One thing that I've learned, and Todd, you can back this up as a politician. A politician's got a reason for saying what they want to say. It may or may not be exactly what's going on. And the same with, there's lots of interests here with various nations.
Right.
And as they all put out information, your listeners, if they're asking, need to have patience and consider the sources and kind of watch what's going on because we're going to learn more.
Yeah. So Larry's preaching patience, Julie. Does he have this kind of patience at home? No. Okay. The answer was no for those that think.
Todd, all politics are local. You taught me that.
Yep.
But all military operations are personal to some
Correct.
families. And like I mentioned about my Israeli buddy and his wife and family who are in and out of air shelters right now, all military operations and combat risk is serious. And Captain Cork,
Every soldier has a family.
Every soldier, every airman has a family. And
Yep.
and like Dean and Tammy Kendall, they've got people that are involved every day and night. So we just need to support them and their families. We really do. Support military families who either have people that they know in the fight now or about to go.
Yeah.
Because it happens.
You've both been extremely generous with your time. As always, you're very kind. I mean, it was 2 days ago when I asked y'all if y'all would like to come do this, and here we are 2 days later and talking almost real time. So thank y'all both very much. Someone asked, what could we do? You know, there's an organization that we're all familiar with. Your brother's very involved, the 22 Project.
22 Project.
And if you've got any, we had Alex and Rob on, and they talked about it. It was one of the episodes. I can't remember the name. Just go to todddancer.com and you'll find it. But it was talking about the episode for 22 Project, and it is to help the soldiers who come back that we've been losing 22 soldiers a day committing suicide. And this is suicide prevention and a very worthy thing. So if you got a couple bucks, I'm sure they'll take it. Anything you could do for them. I'm sure it's 22project.com or 22project.org. I apologize for not being better prepared with that. But thank you guys for your service. Thanks for being
Todd.
wonderful
Thanks,
patriots.
Eli.
Thank you.
Enjoy
Julia,
it,
thanks for coming over and keeping Larry grounded. And Eli, thank you once again. And we hope you enjoyed this episode of Todd's Podcast, and we'll see you soon. Thank you for listening to Todd's Podcast. This has been your host, Todd Dantzler. If you enjoyed today's episode, please don't forget to rate, review, follow, and subscribe to Todd's Podcast on your favorite podcast app. If you have any questions for me, suggestions for future guests, or are interested in sponsorship opportunities for our podcast, please just fill out the contact form on my website, todddantzler.com. I look forward to hearing your questions and feedback, and please take care.